couple slides, same things that you guys have seen for a while now. Just part of the Avid math training that we went to. It was nice to actually be in a training for Avid, or with Avid strategies using Avid, that was geared towards math. So this is essentially just a rate of retention, how much kids would actually remember if you asked them the same questions over that period of time. Which then goes to the rate of forgetting. So how to get them into studying every day. And this is where Frank talked about the interactive notebook and how we can use Cornell Notes with the interactive notebook to go back and keep hitting those repetitions so that we keep that retention there with the kids rather than have everything just be lost.
So what we're doing is the Avid Interactive Notebook, and as you see, it uses a Cornell Notes. It also lends itself easily to the workshop model. And really, you can take the notes the way you want to still, but it's about coming back and revisiting it throughout the time. So we start with the Cornell Notes, the essential questions on top, your study questions on the side, and the actual bulk of the notes go in the middle. Over on this left side, when I presented this to my class, you can say like the processing side or the thinking side, I just called it for math the chicken scratch side. Whenever I gave an example and wanted them to work it out themselves, that's where they process and do their work. So anything the teacher tells them goes on the right side, and then anything that they need to process or write down on their own goes on the left side. So there's a definite split between what the teacher tells you and what you're kind of thinking on your own. So what we're doing is we're just going to take you guys through the lesson we were given. We're not going to make you do any of the math. But we're going to take you through the lesson to show you how to set up the notebook and what it looks like for the students. What James has is my actual notebook that I set up while we were going through it with our facilitator. So our essential question was, how do the dimensions of a rectangle relate to the volume of a cylinder? So we started with just a flat 2D rectangle and then rolled it up to look like a cylinder. They started with definitions. So if you see in my notebook, I have the vocab, the cylinder, and the volume. He gave us those two words that we needed to know, and then the formulas that went with it. So at the very beginning of the note, underneath your essential questions goes the information they must know to be able to know anything throughout the notes. Yeah. So with our first example, what you would tell the students, everything in red is what I first went through the first time we took notes. Everything in black is when we had to go back, and they made us go back through our notes. So right now, just pay attention to the red ink. But what you do is you have the students write their first example in the margin. They're not going to write anything underneath it. They're just putting their example in the margin, and then we work through the first problem together. So he told us, okay, you're going to use this formula, plug in these numbers, and this is how it works. So we just put the example here, and then all the work that goes with it comes over there. So that was example number 1 that we did together. James. So there's us going through the first example, there's all the equations, what it looks like, and then here's example 2.
Okay, so then when we got to the second example, it was less. Teacher presented the problem, and then this is where we get into what Kristen said, the chicken scratch side. So we wrote down the problem just like we had done before, right there in the middle. But then on the left side, or whichever you choose to make that chicken scratch side, is where you would put the work. Because you're kind of doing it on your own a little bit, trying. But this way, what it does is it keeps the clean, correct work on the one side so that when they go back to study, they're only looking at one side of their notes. The left side is where their thinking, their processing, their misunderstandings happen. And so when they look at their correct work, they can go back and see what was my misconception, what am I doing wrong, and compare the two, but that main focus stays on the one side of the paper. And so we worked through, got all that.
Okay. So again, once the students have a little bit of time to work on their own, the teacher leads them through, and then they copy down the correct work to, again, the right side of the page. And then there's your final answer, if anyone can read that. So then again, the last one, he gave us nothing. He gave us the example, we still wrote the example in that margin, and then again, chicken scratch side, go through, write down everything we're thinking, And then as a class, we'll get together and come up with our answer. So all we've done so far is split our work from the left to the right and just putting the first question of each example in that margin. The point for that is if James, if you'd fold the paper. In a lot of classes, use flashcards. Well, I just remember making flashcards, and by the time I made all of them, I'm too tired to even study them. And so this kind of makes the flashcards for you, because in putting just the question on the right side, if you fold your paper over, I can quiz myself. Here's a question, okay, how do I do it, and how do I work it out? So that's kind of the point of drawing that line and just putting the question on the other side, so that you're not giving yourself the answers, because so many students just copy what they have in their notes. So that's a good way of flashcards without having to make the actual flashcards. So then once we finish all the notes, this is where the interactive notebook comes into play, where we actually have to go and revisit the notes.
And so, as you probably see, a lot of this follows through what the process is with the avid students, where they've got to go back and do this, but you're doing it with all of them. And so you have them come up with 3 questions, a level 1, level 2, level 3. They tend to start with those what is, are, how, I, how, what if. So level 1 would be a question that they can answer directly from their notes. No matter your subject, you could come up with something that they could answer right away just by looking back at the notes. Level 2, Frank described it as a between the lines. They've got to look at their notes, but they can still process and come up with something from that. And then level 3 is the what if. So we were talking about this, and we never struggled with the level 3, and he even argued that kids don't struggle with the level 3. And they don't, especially in the math class. They're asking us, well, what would happen if this happens? And they come up with those examples that most of us already plan ahead anyway. And I stay with math, obviously, because I know that better than anything else. So what we're kind of looking at right now is, with a shoulder partner, talk about what a level 1, level 2, level 3 question might be in your own class.